Top of the morning to you all out there in sports world. Welcome to I-80 Sports. And today we are talking more trade deadline details, just like from last week, but we're talking buyers, sellers, and maybe a few surprises as we very quickly and rapidly approach the trade deadline in the NHL. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Make sure you check out our website down below, i80sports.com, for all of our content that's currently there. Besides our NHL content, you can check out our NFL, MLS, NCAA football, NBA, and wrestling content there as well. And hey, if you like the t-shirt that I'm currently wearing here, look at that, nice and green for St. Patty's Day. You can hit that up at our shop right now. Get yourself a t-shirt as low as $8. Hey, it's getting towards the springtime. I'm willing to bet that you need some new t-shirts. Why not rock some I-80 Sports merch and check it out while you're there on our website? And hell, you're here on YouTube. Thanks for finding us here. But if you're not currently subscribed, which I bet you're not, make sure that you hit subscribe and ring the bell just so that way you get notified for every single time that we post. And while you're here on this video, why not join the conversation down below in the comments section? We want to hear from you guys. Join the conversation down below. And while you're there, drop a like if you like what we're doing here and like what we're talking about. And if you're on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at I-80 Sports, I-80_sports NHL. Now I'm just screwing up my dialogue. This is wonderful. No, I'm already sober. It's not that time of St. Patty's Day. But if you're already currently following us on Twitter down below, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Beautiful weather here in Jersey for March. Great day out there, man, I gotta say. So
gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I actually hung out on my porch tonight. It was, oh my God, we're slowly approaching spring. And now that we're approaching spring and getting into that allergy season, I already cannot wait for summer. It cannot come soon enough. But hey, we still got more hockey to play all the way leading up until then. And we got a lot to cover today. And what we're covering today, we're talking about some trade deadline stuff. We're talking about buyers and sellers at the trade deadline, but we've already had a few trades that have gone down and a really interesting re-signing that's happened. So before we talk about buyers, sellers, and surprises later on in this video, we've got to talk, of course, about the trades that have already gone down. So, of course, it's time to talk about some, latest news. Here's the traffic report.
The I-80 Sports Traffic Report, where you can find all your news and notes from the week.
All right, so we already got some teams getting a head start in the trade deadline season. A couple of antsy teams already, and one team of which making two deals of the three that I'm going to mention here. So the first trade that went down, we have the Colorado Avalanche making a trade, making the first splash at the trade deadline here. Real splash at the trade deadline. Yes, Tyler Toffoli was the first real chip to fall to Calgary, but I really kind of consider this a real first trade of the trade deadline. So without further ado, the Colorado Avalanche have acquired defenseman Josh Manson from the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for defensive prospect Drew Helleson and a second-round pick in 2023. It should be noted also that Drew Helleson also just recently signed a 3-year entry-level deal with Anaheim, so he is officially now an Anaheim Duck prospect now. Next, Colorado Avalanche still making moves here. Colorado Avalanche have acquired forward Nico Sturm from the Minnesota Wild in exchange for, kind of surprising in my end, maybe not surprising for Colorado fans, forward Tyson Jost. Kind of surprising in my mind. I might go back and talk a little bit about that. Third trade involves Tom's favorite, maybe not my favorite, New York Rangers. The New York Rangers have acquired forward Frank Vatrano from the Florida Panthers in exchange for the later selection of either New York Rangers' own fourth-round draft pick in this year's draft or Winnipeg's own fourth-round draft pick in 2022, which was previously acquired by the New York Rangers. So whichever is the later selection is what the Florida Panthers will be getting for Frank Vatrano. So 3 deals right off the bat to talk about here. Tom, one move kind of sticks out to you here, and obviously you're going to be talking a little bit on the Rangers side of things, as I would expect. So hit me with it. What do you think about the 3 deals?
Well, Colorado is going off the classic Tampa Bay Lightning blueprint on how to win the Stanley Cup. Tampa, all those years had those, very offensively heavy top 2 lines, but the depth sometimes was a problem. And if there was one thing that Colorado didn't really have last year against Vegas, it was that depth. I was watching a little bit of the Avs game last night, and their announced team, including Peter McNabb, were talking about that Colorado was doing it to create depth and to create size in their bottom 6 and address that issue that they had against Vegas last year. So this is sort of a, basically this league, it's a copycat league. For years it was have big guys all around and win the cup. Then it was just have good positioning all around. Then it was like Chicago had. Then it was like Pittsburgh had. Have speed, have 3 lines that can score, have speed, be able to insert guys with your stars and be able to play fast in the neutral zone. Now it's sort of have 2 scoring lines and just have 2 lines, that can create energy and bang bodies around. And I think that's what Colorado's doing. They're trying to emulate what Tampa Bay has been doing with these 2 deals. So Colorado, it's a little less obvious here, but I think Sakic, saw how Tampa wanted to address the need that they needed last year, and maybe that's why they didn't get to where they should have gone last year.
Yeah, so for me, I like the moves that Colorado made. I think picking up Josh Manson is very obvious good depth to pick up here on the defensive core, especially because Samuel Girard has been missing in action for the Colorado Avalanche for a little bit of time, and it also was announced that he's going to miss at least the next 3 to 4 weeks. So picking up Josh Manson here, I think, is a really safe move for Colorado, and it's just one of those obvious, preps for the playoffs for them. Now, on the Tyson Jost and Nico Sturm side of things, both of these players really don't jump off the stat sheet right now. It's a 1-for-1 move, much akin to the Taylor Hall trade, except not with all the boom and bust. So in Tyson Jost's case, with Minnesota, what they're getting in Tyson Jost right now, just on the stat sheet alone, they're getting 6 goals and 8 assists for 14 points in 59 games played this year. Granted, he hasn't gotten a lot of ice time with the Colorado Avalanche. He's played, on average about 13 minutes a night so far as a member of the Colorado Avalanche this year. It's worth noting that he's a former first-round pick from 2016. He was the 10th overall pick in the 2016 NHL entry draft. And since being drafted that high, he has not really lived up to expectations, or at least to the expectations that Colorado was really kind of putting over his head. His highest point total came in 2018-2019 in 70 games with 26 points, 11 goals, 15 assists. This is a chance for him to kind of revitalize his career, maybe get a good fresh coat of paint in Minnesota. And I think this is a good move for Minnesota. There's no harm, no foul in picking this up. And giving up Nico Sturm in this particular move doesn't really hurt Minnesota. 53 games played for Nico Sturm, 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points on the season. Very similar stats to Tyson Jost. Nico Sturm, I think, will be a very good depth piece for the Colorado Avalanche. He's going to live in that bottom 6, and I think he's going to kind of serve kind of penalty killing minutes and just situational minutes for the Colorado Avalanche. Also very like Tyson Jost, was only averaging about 12 minutes a night with Minnesota. Undrafted free agent also, it should be mentioned, from Germany for the Minnesota Wild. So now coming over to Colorado, I think this is a good depth move. And just once again, just one of those inconsequential moves that you kind of look at and you're just like, okay, that's a move that happened. Now in the Rangers case, Frank Vatrano, I actually really kind of like this move for the Rangers. They really did not give up much to get him, and he's got a very, very deceptive shot. And 49 games played, 19 points, doesn't leap off the page also there, but it's another depth piece. It's another piece to that puzzle for the New York Rangers. Could be part of something bigger later on.
I'm not so sure.
You can elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, he was brought in for depth. Now, I think that this was part of something on the Florida end that I'll get into later on. But the guy, you know what? It's there to shore that third lineup. He's a bottom six player who's on pace for, say, 16, 17 goals. That's great for a bottom six guy. You know, the question is, where do you slot him? Maybe you slot him in on that third line center. You move Filipino over to the left wing and put Barclay Goodrow on the right wing. It's a pretty solid third line, especially when Kakko comes back, because you'll have Kakko slotting right back in on that second line with Panarin and Strome. So you have two good top lines, and then your third line is also pretty good as well. So, and then your fourth line, you have guys like Kevin Rooney, Morgan Barron, Ryan Reeves of the like to fill in. And, you know, there's the odd chance that maybe you do see Sammy Blais back this year. He's been traveling with the team. There's the odd chance that maybe first round of the playoffs he does come back. So, you know, it does shore the Rangers up. The Rangers have needed help with that third line for a while this year. So fingers crossed that this works out. But you know what? They got him for pretty much nothing.
Yeah, it's an inconsequential move, and they got him for nothing, just as Thomas just mentioned. One thing to note with Frank Vatrano stat-wise, 2018-2019 was his best year, and he scored in 81 games played that year. He only missed one game that season, 24 goals and 15 assists that year. For a guy that's going to be slotting into your bottom six, you're getting potentially that type of production from him. I think that's a lot to be excited about if you're a Rangers fan, especially if you only give up a fourth-round pick for this. Fourth-round picks aren't guaranteed in the NHL, and you never know what that type of pick is going to turn into. Sometimes it turns into a gem. A lot of times, not so much. So I think for the Rangers, I think this is a really solid move, and I think this is just one of those pieces that comes in to solidify that bottom six just a little bit more. Moving right along, we had a re-signing, the first UFA re-signing occurring today of all days. So today's actually the day before St. Patrick's Day. It is currently March 16th. And we had a really interesting re-signing here. San Jose has re-signed upcoming UFA forward Tomas Hertl for 8 years at an average of $8 million a year. In the first 3 years, he has a full no movement clause, full no trade clause, and then it modifies from there over the next 5 years into a limited no movement clause, into a short list of teams that he can approve to be traded to. Tom, immediate reaction here. Good move for San Jose, or are they going to live to regret it?
They're going to live to regret this. I don't understand this deal. San Jose is a rebuilding team. You know, they're obviously, I mean, they were safe in the playoffs for a while, but they're obviously not a cup contender. They're not even a mid-rate team, a mid-team, a bubble team. They're not even a playoff team. They're rebuilding. And at the same time, you look at Hertl, the guy is, hold on, I'm going to pull it up right now. He's 28 years old. So this keeps him there till he's 34 with a team that's very uncertain. Now, I know this isn't the old days. I know that teams can rebuild very quick if it's done right. But, I mean, Hertl's good, but is he really worth building your franchise around at this point when you're trying to rebuild, when you're not sniffing that cup? When the days of Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau and Dan Boyle are long, long gone? I just don't think that this is good for either party. San Jose is going to need to rebuild. They should be rebuilding. And, I mean, in reality, Hertl, does Hertl want to win himself a Stanley Cup? Because right now, this looks like he just doesn't care. He got his payday, yes, but he may never get his championship if things don't go right in San Jose because of this deal. And they might not go right because this deal may very well handicap the Sharks for a while. So, you know what? I guess it's a good move for Hertl because he got his payday. But looking forward, I don't think it's a good deal for either side.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think San Jose offered a little bit too much money here for Hertl. Don't get it twisted. He is a top six forward, bona fide top six forward. You look at his stats this year. You look at his stats in previous years. This year alone, in 59 games played, 48 points, 25 goals, 23 assists so far on the season, in an average about 20 minutes a night. He's a bona fide top six player in the NHL. There's no taking that away from him whatsoever. He is a very productive player. His best year on average coming in 2018-2019 when he was 25 years old. In 77 games played, he had 74 points, 35 goals, 39 assists. But this is a San Jose team that is still rebuilding. And the problem is you have contracts on this team that they still are living with for the next number of years. Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, Marc-Edouard Vlasic, all very hefty contracts. And now you're adding you're also now adding Tomas Hertel to that payroll. It's cumbersome. This is shackling the San Jose Sharks. Now, would I rather be shackled to Hertel over Vlasic or Burns or Karlsson? Yes, 100 times yes. But you need to find a way to get rid of one of those 3 contracts, to be quite honest. If San Jose is going to properly rebuild and really make this team back into a contender, they need to ditch one of the 3 players that I just mentioned before in either Karlsson, Burns, or Vlasic. There's no 2 ways about it. That's the only way you can really afford this deal. Unless they have something up their sleeve coming up later this week, I don't know. Unless maybe this is even a sign and trade type of move, which that would have already happened and taken place at this point. I don't know. I think Hertel is getting the money he definitely deserves. Maybe I would have offered $7 million a year. Maybe I would have offered more, $6.5 million a year. I don't know. I think this is going to screw a lot of teams up when they're going to offer money to future players as well. I think this is only the tip of the iceberg as we start approaching free agency in July and talking about that in more detail. But just like that, our news is done for today. So it's time to talk buyers and sellers and more surprises as we approach the trade deadline. So it's time to, I can't speak. It's time to punt the brakes.
Not so fast. It's time to pump the brakes.
What he said, pump the brakes. I couldn't speak for whatever reason. I don't know. English is just not my native language today. Maybe more Macedonian, maybe more so something. I don't really know. Just language is not working today. But either which way, the trade deadline is very, 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 very swiftly approaching. So it's currently March 16th, as I mentioned before. Trade deadline is set for Monday, March 21st. This is going to be the last episode before we talk next week about winners and losers of the trade deadline. And I think this trade deadline is shaping up to be a doozy, especially for teams that want to set themselves up for success. So speaking of setting yourself up for success, what better way to start our discussion by talking about some buyers of this trade deadline right now? So, Tom, who in your mind are a few teams that people should be looking for as buyers at the trade deadline? Now, before you speak, Tom, when I say buyers, I'm talking about teams that are set up in playoff contention right now that are looking to get that extra push into the playoffs to be a bona fide Stanley Cup contender, picking up a high-profile player.
Well, here's the thing. I know we've been talking a lot about Colorado with Claude Giroux, but I mentioned last week Joe Sakic's style is sort of more of a progressive GM where I'm not sure he wants to spend money on an older player, spend assets as an older player who will go UFA over the summer, who he may lose for nothing. And if they don't win the cup, it was all for naught. I think what Colorado did was those depth moves yesterday, maybe the scope of all the Avalanche are going to do. I have a little theory about Claude Giroux and another team. I'm still going to save myself. I'm still going to save that theory rather for later on in the show because I got a whole idea about this that popped in my head earlier today. So I'm not so sure they're going to go for Claude Giroux anymore. A lot of people brought JT Miller up as well, but I think just with the way Vancouver's playing, Vancouver's not moving anybody anymore. I think that the pipe dream of the Canucks moving players out is over. Toronto as well, they were in the running for guys like Max Domi. I can still see them kicking the tires on him. It's the Leafs. The Leafs are desperate. The Leafs are like the Rangers in '94. The Leafs are going to do anything in their power to end this, dare I say it, 54-year curse going on 55 years. They are going to do anything and everything to try to bring a cup to Toronto. I don't know if it's even going to work this year. But you know what? They were in the running for a lot of guys, the Leafs. They were. They need defensive help. I don't know why they would bring in Domi. It doesn't make a lick of sense to me. But I could see them doing it. Another team that's out there, Boston Bruins. The Bruins are in an interesting time right now, believe it or not. You're starting to see guys like Bergeron and Marchand get a little bit older. I'm not even sure that Bergeron is going to stay in Boston. Bergeron pretty much shut down any contract talks after the season's over. So I could see the Bruins going after a reunion for maybe Phil Kessel, just trying to shore the team up. Maybe just saying, okay, well, if you look at our division, we have the Leafs, who we always beat and who always seem to dig themselves in a hole come playoff time. We have the Bolts, who are two-time defending champions, but, eventually, with all the hockey they've played, they're going to run out of steam. And you have a very, and I'm going to say it, unproven Florida Panthers. I'm going to repeat myself here. I cannot sit here and legitimately say the Panthers are going to be in a Stanley Cup final or a conference final or even a second round when they still have yet to win a playoff series with this core. I can't sit here and say that the Panthers are like the creme de la creme of this division because I just haven't seen it through the history yet. And I could very well see, if the dominoes fall the right way, the Bruins come out of that division with the right moves. So, those three teams, Colorado obviously addressed the depth, but maybe Colorado's got something else up their sleeve that we don't know about. Colorado has called about a certain player in Chicago who I don't think is going to be moved this year. But if they have him on their radar over Claude Giroux, I mean, not for nothing, man. With all due respect to Claude Giroux, if your choices are Patrick Kane or Claude Giroux, I'm going with Patrick Kane any day of the week. But that's if it even happens, and I don't think that's happening. That's a pipe dream at this point.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with the three teams that you mentioned. I mean, first of all, it should be mentioned with Toronto for me. If Toronto does not prioritize getting a goaltender right now, they're making a huge mistake in my mind. I mean, Jack Campbell over the past 12 games before getting injured was among one of the worst NHL goalies of that stretch. And it's been really rough for the Maple Leafs lately. I think going out and prioritize a package to pick up Marc-Andre Fleury, he's on the older side, but you want to know what he is? He's playoff proven. They need a playoff-proven goalie, and they need to work backwards and in. Yes, they've got a great offense. Yes, they have a potent offense, but they need defense, and they need goaltending. That's the only way that they're going to make it even past the first round of the NHL playoffs, which they've failed to do for the past few years with this talented roster. So I think prioritizing a trade for Marc-Andre Fleury is paramount for the Maple Leafs. I'm going to throw another interesting team name here that Tom did not mention, the Vegas Golden Knights. And I'm saying the Vegas Golden Knights will be a serious buyer here just because they're a team that is in free fall right now, and they are desperate for any help that they can get right now to get themselves out of this free fall. I could see a reactionary type of move happening. What type of move that is, though, left to be seen. There's been rumors that with Robin Lehner out and now going home to get reevaluated, maybe Laurent Brossoit is not the answer in net, and maybe a reunion with Marc-Andre Fleury could be in the cards. I think that would be a huge mistake, and I think that that is a very toxic thing to do in my mind. If you're the Vegas Golden Knights, and for the fans, I don't see that as a realistic move. They might need to look elsewhere to go get a goaltender.
They might need to go look for a shovel to start digging themselves a hole that they're already in.
Exactly. I just don't see that as a realistic move for them. Realistically, though, if I'm looking down this roster, they really need some bottom six depth. And I think one way that they can achieve that is by dealing Evgeny Dadonov in a move, because they're going to need to make room contract-wise soon. They're going to need to make some room money-wise. And I think dealing Dadonov for something and trying to get an NHL bottom six player from that, even if it means that you also have to deal a pick in there, I think would be advantageous. Even if it means that you're giving up Evgeny Dadonov and like a third-round pick just to get a bottom six role player, I think would be really, really good for the Vegas Golden Knights. Part of the reason that they're in free fall right now is just looking up and down at the injuries right now, the injuries that have been racking up right now for the Vegas Golden Knights. Mark Stone's been on IR for weeks now. Alec Martinez, their leading blocker, has been on IR. Robin Lehner, as I just mentioned before. But then just looking at the rest of this bottom six that has also been hurt. Matthias Janmark has been hurt. Brayden McNabb on their defense has been hurt. Riley Smith has been day-to-day. Max Pacioretty has been day-to-day. You know, these are very important players for the Vegas Golden Knights. And if they don't have their full roster, they need to compensate in some way. And I could see a reactionary, just gut feeling type of move coming from the Vegas Golden Knights, and maybe a surprising move. I don't know what that move could be, but I would not be surprised if Vegas makes a reactionary type of move, especially if they keep losing this weekend. So look for that to potentially happen. There are buyers, but there are also sellers. So, Tom, when we talk about sellers, we're talking about teams that are on the outside looking in of the playoffs. There's probably no chance of them making the playoffs this year. So it's time to sell off maybe some assets that they might not need for the remainder of this year and maybe acquire some draft picks or acquire some prospects. Who in your mind are a few teams that could be sellers this year?
I mean, the obvious one right here is the Philadelphia Flyers. They have the biggest chip. Claude Giroux is the biggest chip at this deadline. I mean, in honesty, him and another player I'm going to mention later, those are probably going to be your two biggest chips right now, just due to re-signings and injuries. At this point, after those two guys go, you're not going to really see much. So it's obviously the Philadelphia Flyers. We talked about some names last week in guys like Thomas Hertl and Joe Pavelski, but they were both signed to extensions, so they're off the board. Jacob Chukrin, he's done. He's injured. He's not going to be healthy by the deadline, so therefore he can't go anywhere. I mean, the other big name here and the other big team is Arizona, and it's Phil Kessel, but it's been a well-known fact all year that they're going to trade Phil Kessel. So, I mean, they're another obvious one. Chicago's an interesting case because it seems like there's some dysfunction in Chicago. Apparently, the other day, Patrick Kane and Kirby Dach had words, and I don't understand why. Kane's a wily veteran. Dach's a young kid who's good, but has never really won anything. Kane's won 3 Stanley Cups, and Dach really had a lot of you-know-what to go up to him and say what he said to him. But the fact is that Chicago's a rebuilder, and if that is going to be a factor that's going to push Kane out of town now, it'd be interesting to see. I don't think Kane goes at this deadline. I do think that they do take calls on Fleury, but I think ultimately Fleury is going to determine where he goes. I don't think Fleury wants to go back to Vegas. I'm not sure Pittsburgh is going to have what Chicago wants to get him back there. He's already said no to DC. Could Colorado bring him over? Possibly. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to have to be like a perfect offer for Fleury to say, okay, I'm out of Chicago. I'll go. Because even though the team's not that great, he loves Chicago. So really just those three. I mean, but from what we're seeing now and the moves that have occurred over the last couple of weeks, it seems like it's going to be very quiet, to tell you the truth.
We're going to have to see what happens. I'm going to play devil's advocate on Chicago's side because in Chicago's case, yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury, there is a likelihood that he could stay in Chicago after all. He has overtly stated that he likes being in the city of Chicago. He likes the organization. He likes his teammates, that he feels at home with this team. Very diplomatic thing to say as well, to be quite honest. I mean, he's been in the NHL for quite some time and knows the diplomatic thing to say. But at the same time, there are still a few players that I think are still worth more than what people actually think. One name that I think really sticks to mind here is Calvin DeHaan. He's been the number one pairing defenseman this year with Seth Jones with the Chicago Blackhawks this year. Calvin DeHaan could actually fetch a decent haul. And what Chicago really could need leading into a potential rebuild are draft picks. And Calvin DeHaan, I think, can fetch a pretty penny from a desperate team. We were talking last week about the Montreal Canadiens, floating out there Ben Chiarot, who has currently been a healthy scratch. He could be traded any day now. And the asking price for him is a first-round pick. I think I'd be more willing to give a first-round pick for Calvin DeHaan than I would be for Ben Chiarot if I were a team looking for an extra defenseman. Calvin DeHaan, I think, could fetch a first-round pick. He could fetch a second-round pick if a team necessarily can give up a second-round pick for him. So I think Chicago getting a high draft pick for Calvin DeHaan would be great, or a really good prospect in return for Calvin DeHaan would really kind of help boost that potential rebuild a little bit further. Other names that kind of stick out to me of players that could be packing up things in Chicago. I'm looking here. Maybe Eric Gustafson could be a name that could be out there. Maybe Jake McCabe could also be out there because teams are always looking for right-handed shots on defense. That always seems to be a big priority, and especially with the potential solutions that are out there right now, there are a little bit too expensive right-handed defensemen out there right now. PK Subban is one person that I think of that teams might be less apt to go and look for just because of his price tag. So maybe going out and getting either Jake McCabe or Eric Gustafson for that late playoff push to play on that bottom pairing could be a decent idea, or just even being a seventh defenseman on that playoff team wouldn't be a bad addition to a playoff contender. Arizona is a very obvious seller right now. They have been among the worst teams in the entire NHL. And I would normally say going and getting draft picks would be great. They need to get draft picks for next year. This year, they've got plenty. They've got quantity and quality at the same time with their draft picks right now this year. I've been over it over and over again, what they currently have this year. Look back on previous videos on Arizona if you're truly curious. But picking up prospects would be great for them. And they've got a bunch of players on their team that they can dangle in a trade right now. Just kind of looking at their roster. Sorry, I don't have it pulled up at the immediate moment, but Phil Kessel is one person that I think of that you could try to get, prospects for. You could try to get prospects for him. You could try to get prospects, obviously, for Jacob Chychrun, who is currently out right now. He is currently hurt, but he's not hurt for the rest of the year, realistically. So he's a player that you could go and trade and really prioritize high-level prospects that are already in an NHL organization. Those are two names that already, jump to mind for me. Other names that I think of that maybe they can try to dangle as well. Christian Fischer is one name that they can dangle out there. If they're really desperate, maybe Clayton Keller, but I don't see them really doing that because Clayton Keller is kind of a building block. There are names on this team that they could also. Shane Gostisbehere is a name that I think of because he's had a career renaissance this year. And why not sell high on him right now and get whatever you can, because his value has never been higher right now. So I think Arizona and Chicago are the very clear, obvious teams that are sellers. Philadelphia, I think, obviously has the most to offer at the moment, but don't sleep on Arizona. Don't sleep on Chicago. And I'm already listening to people in the tri-state area. No, the New Jersey Devils are not sellers. They're anything but at the moment. They actually could be a team that could make a surprise splash. But who knows? They also might play conservatively. All right. Speaking of surprises, let's talk about some surprises. Some surprises that may happen. Maybe a team that maybe we weren't expecting to make a big splash could make a big splash. Tom, who's a team that sticks out in your mind? And I know you alluded to them before, so I'm curious to hear what you think.
Well, I think that this Frank Vatrano deal, the Panthers dealing him to the Rangers, was a cap dump to bring in the aforementioned Claude Giroux. I do really think that after what Sakic did in Colorado, I think right now Florida may be the front runner for him. And I also think Florida may be a front runner for Ben Chiarot as well. I think Florida might be trying to emulate what Tampa did in a way, bringing in that depth defenseman like they did with David Savard last year. Sorry. I don't know why I thought it was earlier this year. Anyways, yeah, that's why I think. I'm reading today and I'm going, this Vatrano deal, like I alluded to before, has cap dump written all over it. They're clearing cap to bring somebody in, and I think that somebody is Claude Giroux, and if they could find a way to bring in Ben Chiarot, I think that they bring him in as well. And they do go for that run at the Cup. But like I said, they need to win 4 playoff games before I can even be serious about them.
Yeah, I think Florida could be a very big surprise team. I think they're the most likely landing spot right now for Claude Giroux. And I was saying that a few weeks ago as well. Florida could be. I'm going to throw another team out there, though. The Los Angeles Kings. Simply because they're still in second place in the Pacific Division. And it's by a little bit right now, admittedly, but they've been consistently one of the best teams in the Pacific Division. Calgary is the best team in the Pacific right now, but Los Angeles could be, trading back and forth with them over the next few weeks, to be quite honest. They've been a team that's been on a tear. I actually kind of favor LA as a potential landing spot for Chiarot at the moment because they could really use a gritty defenseman. And what is Chiarot? A gritty defenseman. And just looking at their defensive depth, they have pretty decent defensive depth. But, having names on their back end such as Drew Doughty, Olli Maatta, Christian Wolanin, I think would really kind of push them over the edge as a bona fide Stanley Cup playoff team. Maybe not necessarily contender, but a very respectable team going into the NHL playoffs. A team that you really should not sleep on. This LA team, I really like how it's been constructed. This is a rebuild done properly. I cannot praise it enough. This is a rebuild.
Boston Bruins-esque. They're just emulating kind of what Boston did.
Yeah, this has just been well done across the board. They might even deal a surprise player here. Gabriel Velarde has been a player that has been floated out in trade talks. And if it means that they pick up a big chip in return, I would not be surprised if they trade Gabriel Velarde in a deal to get somebody even bigger. So those are my thoughts. I think LA could be a very interesting surprise team as we enter the trade deadline. But, before we pivot away from here, guys, what do you guys think? We want you to let us know down below. But before we start wrapping up this episode, we got to talk about some high performers of this week from around the NHL. Let's talk high performance.
Your I-80 Sports High Performance Players of the Week.
Tom, who do you want to mention this week as Players of the Week?
Well, one is aforementioned Chicago Blackhawks star Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane, man. He has, hold on, I have it right here. 12 points over his last 4, including one game where he had 6 points. And I also want to, a little bit of a homer alert here. Artemi Panarin, his former teammate. Artemi Panarin has 12 points in his last 5. Panarin, I'm trying to pull the stat up here. Just give me 1 second, guys. I'm just trying to pull something up real quick. This thing's taking forever, my apologies. Panarin had himself, hold on, where did it go? He had himself a 5-point game. I thought he had the same thing as Pat Kane, but he didn't. He had himself a 5-point game against the Dallas Stars. Could we very well see these two reunited? Maybe not this year, maybe next year, maybe the year after. But could we see them two playing together like I alluded to last week? You never know. But it is kind of crazy how they both had some nice little runs lately. Maybe they're trying to get each other's attention. Maybe Kane's saying, "Hey, I want to come to New York. Let me come here." I don't think Panarin's saying he wants to go back to Chicago at this point.
Yeah, really good picks here this week for you. And I've got 3 players that I want to mention here. First and foremost, I'm going to mention from a team that nobody would expect, the Arizona Coyotes, Nick Schmaltz. Let's talk about this. In his past 7 games, 7 goals, 10 assists, 17 points in his last 7 games. He's a plus 16 over that time, with 1 power play goal and 2 game-winning goals to boot along those stats. He has been on fire lately, and he has been a bright spot on an otherwise dismal Arizona team. Another player I want to mention here is Roman Josi, the captain, the top defenseman of the Nashville Predators, basically coming in and saying, "Oh, what's this? What are we talking about? Norris talks? Yeah, don't forget about me." Coming in, 7 games, 3 goals, 13 assists, 16 points over his last 7 games, averaging almost 25 minutes a night as well to boot. He has been fantastic over this stretch. And then I'm going to be a little homer too. And admittedly, I'm a day late on this, and I'm upset that I'm a day late on this. He didn't have his best stuff last night, but the current starting goaltender for the New Jersey Devils, Nico Daws, who is a Devils prospect, in his last 8 starts, minus last night where he gave up 4 goals. In his last 8 starts before that, he's 5-3 with a 2.25 goals against and a .928 save percentage. He's been on fire, and hopefully either he gets the night off tonight or he's able to come back strong against the Calgary Flames tonight. But he's been, a blessing in disguise for the New Jersey Devils, and a really interesting talking piece, because maybe that means maybe there's some interesting competition for when Mackenzie Blackwood does eventually come back for the New Jersey Devils, but that's another topic for another day. Before we wrap things up, it's time for our question of the day, which our question of the day this week is, who makes the most moves during the trade deadline? Tom, who's your pick? Who do you think makes the most deals?
Like I said, Colorado's sort of done maybe what they wanted to do already. I guess Florida. But like I said before, this is going to be a quiet deadline. Once Giroux goes somewhere and once Kessel goes somewhere, I think it's going to be really quiet. Once you see those 2 moves made, I think you're just going to see a lot of minor transactions, whether it be prospect for prospect, draft pick for draft pick, minor leaguer for minor leaguer. I'm going to say Florida, but to tell you the truth, it's kind of hard to tell. It's going to be a weird deadline, to tell you the truth. It might be, like I said, after those two, and I guarantee you those two deals probably get done early. After that, I mean, I hear crickets, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think it's going to be relatively quiet, but I wouldn't necessarily sleep on it, pun intended. So I think Colorado already does have a head start. I'm going to say Colorado is the team that makes the most moves just because I think they're at risk of being too quiet at the deadline, and I think that's going to spell disaster for them. They could inevitably pick up another goaltender as insurance, so that is a potential move that they could have in their back pocket. Other than that, I think Florida is another interesting team. I think they could make the biggest splash by acquiring Claude Giroux and maybe another name. So I think Florida and Colorado are safe picks to be the top deals at the trade deadline. But guys, as always, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? You got to let us know down below. Join the conversation in the comments section below. We want to hear from you guys. We want to be able to, keep the conversation alive with you guys down below. The only way that happens is if you drop a comment. And while you're there, drop a like and make sure you subscribe, because I'm willing to bet that you're not subscribed already. Make sure you hit the bell so that way you know every single time we post or even go live, because you never know. That could happen sometime soon. And if you're here on YouTube and you're wondering, where else can I check out their content? Check out our website down below, i80sports.com, for all of our NHL content, as well as our NFL, MLS, NCAA football, NBA, and wrestling content as well. And like I said before, if you're liking this t-shirt that I'm wearing, if you want to rock the St. Paddy's Day spirit, i80 Sports style, make sure you check out our shop. Get yourself a t-shirt as low as $8. And if you're on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at i80_sportsNHL. And if you're following us already, thank you guys so much, because we greatly value all of your support. Without you guys, we can't do this on a weekly basis. But I think it's finally time to let the trade deadline breathe a little bit. We're going to let things just kind of ride out, kind of happen. And we'll be here next week to give you all of our reactions, our winners and losers from the trade deadline next week. You don't want to miss that. Make sure you hit the bell notification so that way you don't miss that episode. But for now, I'm Brian. He's Tom. Drink responsibly this St. Paddy's Day, and make sure you ask for a ride if you're too inebriated to drive, and enjoy your St. Paddy's Day. But this has been yet another episode of NHL on i80 Sports.